Charles Robert Darwin was born on February 12, 1809, in England. He was born into wealth and privilege and was the second youngest of 6 kids. Charles Darwin came from a long line of scientists. His father was a medical doctor and his grandfather was a renowned botanist. Darwin's mother, Susanna, died when he was only 8 years old. As a child, Darwin loved to explore nature, so it is no surprise that he spent 5 years voyaging around the globe making observations of the animals he viewed in nature. He married his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood, in 1839 at the age of 29, and together they had 10 children. 3 of his children died in their early years, and the others struggled with often being unwell. Darwin later spoke to the negative impacts that producing offspring with a cousin can bring. In October 1825, at the age of 16, Darwin enrolled at Edinburgh University along with his brother Erasmus. 2 years later, he became a student at Christ's College in Cambridge. His father hoped he would follow in his footsteps and become a medical doctor, but the sight of blood made Darwin queasy. His father suggested he study to become a parson instead, but Darwin was more inclined to study natural history. In 1831, Darwin embarked on a 5-year voyage around the world aboard the HMS Beagle. He studied specimens along his journey, which led him to formulate his theories. When the 26-year-old Charles Darwin arrived at Australia, he was in awe about the strangeness of Australians' native creatures. It made him speculate about the ways they have developed in isolation from the rest of the world. In Australia, Darwin first saw a rat kangaroo and a platypus and noted how they occupied similar ecological niches to the Northern Hemisphere's rabbit and water rat, but they looked very different. His many wanderings would inform his world-renowned book on the origin of species. Darwin's book on the origin of species is considered to be the foundation of evolutionary biology. It introduced the scientific theory that populations evolve over the course of generations through a process of natural selection. His book, Darwin, included evidence that he gathered on the HMS expedition in the 1830s, as well as his subsequent findings from research, correspondence, and experimentation. There were those who did not support Darwin's theory, and this furthered the evolutionism versus creationism debate. Whether modern life on Earth evolved over millions of years or was created in the blink of an eye by God has been an ongoing science versus religion debate. The debate has been a contentious debate because it is believed that our views on morality, justice, humanity, obligation, and the like are all closely tied to our views on human origin. Darwin stands as a significant figure in the history of science, right along with Newton and Einstein. His idea of natural selection is the cornerstone for modern evolutionary thought and has provided a basis for scientists to better understand biology. What is so significant about Darwin's achievement is how ahead of his time he was. Without any understanding of modern genetics, he managed to come up with the idea of inherited traits and the mutation of these traits over time. His contributions is viewed as brilliant. So what exactly is Darwin's theory of evolution? This theory declared that the species survived through a process called natural selection, where those that successfully adapted or evolved to meet the changing requirements of their natural habitat. These species thrived, while those that failed to evolve and reproduce died off. By observing birds, plants, and fossils, Darwin noticed similarities among species all over the globe, along with variations based on specific locations, which led him to believe that all species that we know today gradually evolved from common ancestors. Darwin's theory of evolution and the process of natural selection later became known simply as Darwinism. In simple terms, this means that if a species developed a functional advantage, for instance, grew wings and learned to fly, its offspring would inherit that advantage and would pass it on to their offspring. The disadvantaged or inferior members of the same species would gradually die out, leaving only the superior members of the species. Their advantage, which enabled them to compete better in the wild, was coined as survival of the fittest. In Darwinian terms, it means survival of the form that will leave the most copies of itself in successive generations. This theory has been applied in today's world in terms of breeding. Breeders have produce dramatic changes in domestic animal populations by selecting individuals to breed. By breeding, they eliminate undesirable traits gradually over time. Similarly, natural selection eliminates inferior species gradually over time. Many struggled to accept Darwin's theory, and for years, teaching evolution was banned in certain schools and school boards. When Darwin announced his theory that humans and apes had descended from a common ancestor, he sent shockwaves through the Western world. America's churches hotly debate whether to accept the findings of modern science or continue to follow the teaching of ancient scripture. In 1925, the Tennessee legislature passed the Butler Law, which forbade the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution in any public school or university. Other Southern states followed suit. The American Civil Liberty Union led the charge of evolution supporters. It offered to fund the legal defense of any Tennessee teacher willing to fight the law in court. The man who accepted the challenge was John T. Scopes, a science teacher and football coach in Dayton, Tennessee. In the spring of 1925, he walked into his classroom and read from the approved biology textbook about the evolution of humankind and Darwin's theory of natural selection. His arrest soon followed, and the case went to trial. In the end, the jury sided with the law. Scopes was in violation of Tennessee statute by teaching that humans evolved from apes. He was fined $100 and released. The anti-evolution law was upheld. Over the years, similar cases were brought to court. Teaching evolution has remained contentious in various U.S. states. Debating, passing, and voting down alternative approaches to creationism in classrooms continues to this day. Darwin's contribution to science is undeniable, as such a day has been established to pay tribute to Charles Darwin. Darwin Day is a celebration to commemorate the anniversary of the birth of Charles Darwin on the 12th of February, 1809. It is viewed that this important date because it is felt that without the discovery of natural selection, the greatest achievements in health, philosophy, and human well-being over the past 200 years would have been impossible. Darwin's accomplishments are vast. They include 25 publications, with his main publication being On the Origin of Species, and various medals which include the Royal Medal for his important contributions to the natural knowledge, the Wollaston Medal for his contribution to the field of geology, and the Copley Medal for his outstanding achievement in science. In his honor, a medal called the Darwin Medal was created after his death. It is awarded by the Royal Society every alternate year for work of acknowledged distinction in the broad area of biology. One of the recipients includes Francis Darwin, Charles Darwin's son, who followed in his father's footsteps by delving into the field of biology. Darwin's legacy has a direct bearing on how society makes public policy and even at times on how we choose to run our lives. Many modern diseases, obesity, diabetes, and autoimmune disorders come about, in part because of the mismatch between our genes and an environment that changes more quickly than human genomes can evolve. Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection continue to be referred to in our current day, nearly 2 centuries later.